Welcome to the Deep Dive. We're here to pull out the key insights from your sources. Today we're heading to a place many call paradise on Earth, Kashmir. Beautiful, yes, but we're digging into something else just as vital. It's apple industry. It's more than just fruit. It's really the backbone of the whole regional economy.
Yeah, the scale is, well, it's pretty staggering when you look at it. Think about this, over 70% of India's entire apple production, it comes from
The
Kashmir.
70%. Wow.
We're talking nearly 2.2 million metric tons every year.
Yeah,
That's a huge harvest, and it shows just how deeply woven this industry is into people's lives there.
exactly. And it supports, what, nearly 2.5 lakh families?
That's right, 250,000 families, a lot of them small, marginal farmers. It's their
And
lifeline.
it's about 9.5%, nearly 10%
Yeah.
of Jammu and Kashmir's GDP. So for you listening, our mission in this deep dive is to unpack this major shift that's happening. We're seeing Kashmiri growers cutting down these cherished traditional orchards, Ambri, Kullu, Maharaji apples,
Yeah, the ones they've grown for ages.
and replacing them with these imported high-density Italian plants. Often they're genetically modified GM varieties.
And that choice, that's the core tension we're exploring today. Why this big shift? What are the real consequences? Culturally, environmentally, economically, socially, too. What does it all actually mean for Kashmir's future? That's what we want to understand.
Okay, let's get into it. To really grasp this shift, we need to start with the heritage, the deep roots of those traditional Kashmiri apples, and then look at why these new varieties are so tempting.
Exactly. So you have these native varieties like Ambri. They've been grown for centuries, literally centuries. They're perfectly suited to Kashmir's climate, the soil, the cold winters, the milder
It's like
summers.
tough, right?
Yeah.
Resistant to local pests and
Yeah,
diseases.
very resilient. And the taste, Ambri, Kulu, Maharaji, they have this distinct sweet tart flavor. Plus, they keep, well, a long shelf life, which made them huge favorites across India.
But it's more than just a crop, isn't it? There's a cultural weight to them.
Oh, absolutely. They're symbols of Kashmiri heritage, woven into traditions, into the food. They're part of the identity.
That makes sense. But, okay, looking at it from a farmer's point of view,
Mm-hmm.
there must be a downside to the traditional way.
There is a practical challenge, yes. Traditional orchards have these tall trees spaced far apart. That means fewer trees you can actually plant per acre.
Okay.
And the big one, they take a long time to start producing fruit. We're talking maybe 8 to 10 years.
8 to 10 years just to get started.
Right. So you've got a lower yield per acre and a very long wait. That's tough economically.
Okay. And that's where the appeal of these high-density Italian varieties comes in strong.
Precisely. The promise is really attractive. You get harvests in just 2 or 3 years.
2 to 3 compared to 8 to 10. Big difference.
Huge. And critically, potentially up to 4 times the yield per acre compared to the old methods.
4 times the yield.
Uh,
How does that work? What's the technology behind it?
It's mainly about the rootstocks. They use dwarf rootstocks. These allow the trees to be planted much, much closer together, so you just pack more plants onto the same piece of land.
I see. More trees, faster fruit, higher volume.
Exactly. And this is really appealing because many farmers are dealing with old orchards, maybe 15, 20 years old. Productivity is dropping, methods are outdated, the returns are low.
So it's a way to sort of modernize and boost income. And I guess the wider market plays a role too.
Definitely. Demand for apples in India is rising, but at the same time, there's more competition from imported apples from the US, South Africa, places like that.
So pressure from both sides. Need more apples, but facing cheaper imports.
Right. It pushes farmers hard towards maximizing their output any way they can.
And the government's noticed this push. They're actively supporting
Oh,
it.
yes. The Jammu and Kashmir government has this modified high-density plantation scheme. The goal is pretty ambitious, convert 5,500 hectares by 2026.
And they're helping financially.
Big time. Offering a 50% subsidy. That covers irrigation systems, crucial things like hail nets, and the planting material itself.
Okay, so half the cost is covered. That's significant.
It is. And from the industry side, people like Kuramir from Qual Venture, they see this as, well, necessary, an evolution.
Necessary how?
For an industry worth around 8,000 crore rupees, that's about $1 billion US, they argue high-density farming is just essential to meet the market demand and fundamentally make farming more profitable for the growers.
Okay, so the economic case seems strong, at least on the surface. Faster returns, higher yields, government support. But this kind of major shift,
Yeah.
it always comes with trade-offs, doesn't it? There's a cost.
There absolutely is. And when we dig into the consequences, several serious concerns top up. The first one, maybe the most poignant, is the erosion of cultural heritage and biodiversity.
How so?
Well, you're replacing these native varieties, Ambri, Kullu apples that, like we said, are more than just fruit. They're cultural touchstones. They have unique flavors you can't just replicate.
So you risk losing that distinctiveness.
Exactly. You risk replacing this rich agricultural heritage with something more, well, homogenous. Market-driven varieties that just don't have that specific Kashmiri character.
I know some officials, like horticulture officer Zohor Ahmadpad, argue it's about adapting climate change, consumer tastes.
They do. And there's some truth to needing adaptation, but traditional growers, they're worried, genuinely worried about these native types just vanishing, extinction, and future generations losing that connection to their farming roots.
That's a heavy thought, losing part of your identity almost. Okay, so culture is one angle. What about the environment? You mentioned alarm bells.
Yes, big ones. Think about how those native varieties evolved. They're adapted, right? They need minimal chemical help, minimal extra water.
Okay.
These new high-density orchards, totally different story. They rely heavily on chemical inputs, pesticides, fertilizers, and a lot more irrigation.
And water is already an issue in Kashmir, isn't it? With climate change.
It's becoming a major issue. They've had consecutive dry winters, streams are drying up, springs too, especially in the main apple belts. High-density orchards need consistent high water input. That makes them extremely vulnerable when water gets scarce.
And the chemicals, that leads to health concerns.
Serious ones. There was this quite alarming study back in 2010. It found that 90% of brain tumor patients in Kashmir's orchard areas had been exposed to common pesticides.
90%.
Yes. Chemicals like mancozeb, captain, chlorpyrifos, specifically linked to high-grade tumors. It's stark. And beyond human health, these chemicals obviously degrade the soil, pollute the water.
That's deeply concerning. Okay, so cultural loss, environmental strain, health risks. What about the economics for the farmers themselves? It's supposed to be more profitable, but are there hidden costs?
Big hidden costs, especially upfront. Remember that 50% subsidy? It's helpful, but it still leaves the other 50%.
Which the farmer has to cover.
Exactly. For small, marginal farmers, that's a huge financial burden. Imported saplings are expensive, setting up irrigation, the constant maintenance. It adds up fast. For many, it's just too much to take on.
So the entry cost is high. And are they always getting what they pay for? I heard whispers about quality issues.
Yeah, there have been reports. Substandard saplings, delays in getting them from private suppliers. The horticulture department is trying to step in, procure plants directly to ensure quality, but some lapses still seem to happen.
And then there's Mother Nature. Climate risks seem to be getting worse.
Definitely. Hailstorms, for example. They're becoming more frequent, more severe in areas like Shopian and Kulgam, and they can absolutely devastate these high-density orchards.
How do they compare to the traditional trees in a hailstorm?
The native trees are generally more resilient, tougher. These newer, often more delicate high-density trees, they can suffer irreparable damage. It can take years for them to recover if they ever fully do.
And insurance doesn't cover it adequately.
That's the critical gap. There isn't really robust, widespread crop insurance. So one bad hailstorm, and a farmer who's invested heavily in high density can be financially ruined. It's a massive gamble.
Wow. Okay, let's broaden the view a bit. Global markets, trade. How does this shift play into that bigger picture?
Well, first off, Kashmir's apple exports are already sometimes flagged for high pesticide residue levels that can limit where they can sell internationally.
Right.
And then there's the GM factor. While these varieties might boost yields, consumer acceptance of genetically modified food varies wildly. Many countries have really strict rules.
So market access could be an issue down the line.
Could be. And then there's this really contentious point right now. Import duties. There's talk, especially related to trade deals with the U.S., about lowering the import duty on apples coming into India.
Lowering duties. So cheaper foreign apples flooding the market.
That's the fear. It would put enormous pressure on Kashmiri growers who are already dealing with all these other challenges.
And farmers are pushing back.
They are.
Yeah.
Farmer unions not just in J&K, but Himachal Pradesh, Uttarakhand too. They're planning, I believe, a nationwide strike soon to protest these kinds of policies.
So putting all your eggs in the high-density GM basket, it sounds like it could make the whole industry much more vulnerable to global price swings, trade politics, undermining the stability they're seeking.
That's the risk, yeah. Less resilience, potentially more volatility.
And zooming back in, what about the social fabric? The community impact, food security.
This is crucial. Apple farming in Kashmir, it's not just a job, right? It's a way of life for generations.
Mm-hmm.
But high-density farming needs significant capital, technical know-how. The worry is that this could lead to orchards getting concentrated in fewer, wealthier hands.
Marginalizing the small guys.
Potentially, yes. And about 90% of the farmers are smallholders. They're the backbone. If they get pushed out, you can see rural poverty worsen, inequality grow.
And you mentioned the intensive labor needed for these new orchards, pruning, fertilizing, constant irrigation.
Right. That might just not be sustainable for farmers already struggling. And we're even seeing some worrying signs of desperation reports of vandalism, theft of these valuable high-density trees in places like Shopian, Bandipora.
That speaks volumes about the pressure people are under. And what about what people actually eat in Kashmir?
Good point. These native apples, they're staples in Kashmiri homes, suited to the local diet. If you replace them wholesale with varieties bred mainly for export markets, do they fit local tastes, local nutritional needs? It could subtly shift regional food security over time.
It feels like a complex web of interconnected issues. But, amidst all these challenges, are there any bright spots, any alternative paths emerging?
There are, and it's important to highlight them. We heard about Adil, a grower in Shopian. He's doing something really interesting.
What's that?
He's sticking with his native Kullu apples, but he's using social media really effectively, apparently, to market them directly, finding buyers in places like Pune, even Dubai.
Wow, direct-to-consumer, bypassing some of the traditional chains?
Exactly, and it shows there is potential for these native varieties. You just need maybe different, more modern strategies to connect with the market.
That's encouraging. It suggests it's not necessarily an either situation.
It doesn't have to be, and Adil's success really points towards the need for a more sustainable path forward, a multi-pronged approach.
Okay, so what would that look like? What are the key elements?
Well, first, preservation has to be a priority for the government, really actively conserving these native apple varieties. That could mean things like gene banks for seeds, maybe incentives for farmers who keep traditional orchards going.
Protect the heritage. And maybe improve it.
Yes, that's the second part. Research and development. We need investment in figuring out how to boost the productivity of native types without losing what makes them unique. And definitely focus on developing climate-resilient native Kashmiri apples. That's critical.
Makes sense. Preserve and innovate on the traditional stock. What else?
Farmer support needs strengthening. That crop insurance issue, it needs fixing. Expand robust insurance schemes to cover these climate risks.
Absolutely.
And ensure farmers get access to good quality, affordable planting material, whether it's high density or improved native types. Rigorous quality checks, timely delivery. That needs to be reliable, likely driven by the horticulture department.
Okay, support and quality control. And then there's the technology and marketing side, like Adil's example.
Right. Leverage technology. Digital platforms have huge potential. We're even seeing things like WhatsApp groups being used for, say, early pest warnings or coordinating help after hailstorms. Simple tools, big impact.
Community support through tech.
Exactly. So the government needs to invest in digital infrastructure, train farmers in modern marketing, and logistics matter too. That proposed Apple Express freight train could be a game changer for getting apples efficiently to markets across India.
Better transport, better market access.
For all types of apples. And finally, it's about finding a balance.
How do you mean?
Running awareness campaigns for farmers, making sure they understand the long-term risks of relying solely on high density or GM, encouraging them to perhaps integrate modern techniques with their traditional knowledge, not just replace it wholesale.
Finding that middle ground. Harmony, as you said.
Exactly.
So let's try to wrap this up. For you listening, what's the main takeaway from this deep dive?
I think it's seeing this shift in Kashmir's apple industry as a real double-edged sword. There's this pull of immediate economic benefit, modernization.
The allure of the new.
Right. But it comes with these significant shadows, threats to culture, the environment, and maybe even long-term economic stability.
And the stakes feel incredibly high. Losing varieties like Ambri, Kullu, it's not just sentimental. It's about losing agricultural heritage, yes, but also potentially exposing farmers to more risk from climate change, market volatility, those health hazards we talked about.
Which means the path forward really has to be collaborative. Government, experts, farmers working together, finding that vital, probably quite delicate, balance between modernizing and preserving.
So continuing to invest strategically in the native varieties, fixing the support systems like irrigation and insurance, and using technology wisely.
That seems essential. The apple in Kashmir, It's such a potent symbol of pride, of resilience. It really shouldn't be allowed to just fade away.
Absolutely. And that leaves us and you with a final thought to chew on. In this fast-paced, globalized world we live in, how do we make sure that innovation actually helps protect and enrich the unique agricultural heritage and biodiversity of places like Kashmir all around the globe, rather than accidentally erasing it?